Ladies and gentlemen, the morning of October 10th, 2025 did not begin with the familiar ring of an alarm clock, but with the sob of the markets. Wall Street awash in red, the dollar slipping, and on social media, more precisely on the hybrid name Truth Social X, favored by Donald Trump, a gleaming line in all caps like a bugle at dawn. China has cheated long enough. We're taking back America. Alongside it came the decree, a 100% import tariff on all Chinese goods, effective November 1st. A straight punch at global trade, a drill through supply chains, a slice across Americans' wallets, packaged as a patriotic step to revive U.S. industry. In the political square, applause thundered. On the market boards, numbers fell like hail. And on the kitchen tables of millions of American families, a quiet, aching question rose. Who pays the bill for this protectionism? This is not the first chapter of a new book. The ghost of 2024 has returned, bigger, deeper, more painful. You'll recall, a year ago, Washington tested maximum tariffs. The Trump administration slapped rates of 70% to 104% on many Chinese product groups, from electronic components and EVs to clean energy materials. Then came a new twist. On April 9th, 2025, the Protect America tariff schedule took effect, touted by Mr. Trump on a Michigan stage as a strategic victory. We're hitting China where it hurts most. 3 months later, the pain point appeared at Walmart, Home Depot, Best Buy. TVs, laptops, smartphones up 8 to 12%, EVs $5,000 to $7,000 more per car. Clean energy, an industry America dreamed of leading, saw costs jump as much as 18%. The theory of bringing jobs home never made it off the poster before prices walked straight onto household bills. Jobs didn't show up, prices and anxiety did. BLS data recorded June 2024 CPI at 3.0%, wiping out 6 straight months of cooling in 2023. Q3 2024 GDP was just 1.1%, a post-pandemic low, and in a single month, the S&P 500 posted 3 sessions down more than 2%, rare since 2020. Wall Street gave it a name, Trump Shock 2. When economists warn that wielding tariffs as a political weapon is shooting yourself in the foot, the man in the White House seemed to hear only the cheers, because Trump doesn't craft policy like an architect. He stages politics like a theater director. Every decree is a set piece, every tariff a slogan, every market shock mere background sound for the message of toughness. But economies don't run on slogans. They run on costs, production chains, and expectations. A 100% tariff spins no copper, fabricates no chips, opens no rare earth refinery. It simply doubles input costs, lifts output prices, and erodes confidence in between. Look around the store. iPhones assembled in India still carry parts from Shenzhen. Tesla in California still uses boards, magnets, sensors from Guangdong. Solar panels in Texas still need Sichuan silicon. When the entire flow is taxed at 100%, the bill doesn't arrive at Zhongnanhai. It's set down in front of Americans. Last year's shock already mapped the pain's path. A $30 billion farm aid package pumped into the Midwest after China retaliated with 25 to 40% tariffs on U.S. farm goods. Soybean exports down 41%, pork and corn tumbling, public debt hitting $36 trillion. The world saw Washington like a drunken debtor, staggering yet shouting, "I'm fine." This year, the 100% tariff turns 2024's lesson into a bitter postscript. Wall Street's market cap evaporated by $1.65 trillion in mere hours. NASDAQ minus 3.5%, S&P minus 2.7%. Crypto, the most sensitive gauge of policy risk, shed $250 billion. Bitcoin minus 8%, Ethereum minus 15%. On Binance and Coinbase, auto liquidation surged to $19.16 billion. A new record. Not panic without cause, but the survival reflex of confidence ambushed by policy. Then came the podium line, protecting America. Allow a simple metaphor. Drilling a hole in your ship's hull is not how you sink the enemy, it's how you sink yourself. American giants, Apple, Nvidia, Tesla, do not live in a vacuum. They rely on Chinese components and materials. A 100% tariff sucks straight from margins, forcing price hikes, production cuts, delayed investments. When the locomotive slows, the cars behind, contractors, logistics, ancillary services, topple like dominoes. At the micro level, it's a few extra dollars on a bill. At the macro level, it's a $26 trillion economy biting its own hand. China needs no fireworks. It only needs a dry, administrative circular issued the very morning Washington announced 100% tariffs, an expansion of rare earth export controls. Specifically, Beijing added 5 elements to the list, bringing the total restricted to 12, and moved dozens of mining refining tools and feedstocks under licensing. Export files must name end users, end uses, and intermediaries. Defense-related applications will be rejected, and advanced semiconductor/AI-related ones scrutinized down to the screws. This isn't a squeeze on raw ore, but on the midstream technologies, the very arteries that produce permanent magnets, alloys, and components for EVS, aerospace/defense, and high-end electronics. The squeeze reaches beyond China's borders. For the first time, Beijing says foreign producers must seek licenses if their output relies on Chinese rare earth materials or equipment. In other words, a German, Japanese, or American firm making magnets alloys with Chinese inputs or refining tools must seek Beijing's approval to sell internationally, while, say, a European washing machine that merely contains a pre-made magnet doesn't fall under this rule. The approach mirrors U.S. extraterritorial tech controls in chips and aims to cement China's grip on the rare earth chain, making the West's de-China push even steeper, especially with this move landing just before a planned Trump-Xi meeting at month end. We've seen the precedent. An earlier April round of controls caused rare earth magnet shortages, forcing some European auto plants and suppliers to pause lines for lack of motors, sensors, and specialized magnetic parts. As Washington brandishes the 100% tariff hammer, Beijing turns the rare earth valve. America's EV semiconductor defense chain chokes at its thinnest joint because China today holds the bulk of the world's refining and processed magnet capacity. What America faces is structural, not rhetorical. Rare earths aren't rare in the ground. They're rare in refining and purification, the steps where the U.S. has lagged for decades. To replace the 90% processing capacity China controls would take the U.S. 7 to 10 years and hundreds of billions of dollars across mining, refining, recycling, and magnet manufacturing, while demand from EVS, wind, and aerospace/defense rises exponentially. Self-reliance cannot happen overnight. A 10-day licensing delay can upend production schedules, stretch it to months, and entire sector KPIs slip. This reality creates a two-tier legal trap for U.S. firms. Fear U.S. penalties if sensitive products contain Chinese content, and fear Chinese cutoffs if they fail to comply with Beijing's new extraterritorial licenses. Allies aren't idle either. Japan, Korea, and the EU are negotiating quotas or special channels, accelerating diversification to Vietnam, Australia, India, and Africa. But that's a long road, not a quick fix. One smile on CCTV and a line dropped like a stone into a well. Want a tariff war? Learn to manufacture without rare earths. 70% of U.S. rare earth imports come from China. About 90% of global refining capacity sits there. 1 week of slower licensing and lines in Texas or Michigan gasp when Washington's 100% tariffs block goods and Beijing's permits tighten the valve. The two superpowers grip each other's throats. But the one starved of oxygen first is not Beijing. It's an economy self-inflating costs at every link. The real price of this war isn't only in CPI points or growth decimals, it's in the strategic anchor slipping from the entire Western economic system. When Washington turns tariffs into political theater rather than targeted economic policy, reliability, the bedrock allies need to plan long term, starts to crack. As that reliability fades, the system pays an insurance premium. Firms buy policy risk coverage, build buffer inventories instead of just in time, and invest in parallel lines to hedge politics. Those non-value adding costs are rolled into consumer prices, turning inflation into a chronic condition. Globally, U.S. allies aren't resisting Washington. They're surviving Washington's unpredictability. In Europe, Brussels is fast-tracking open strategic autonomy, preserving free trade while erecting soft guardrails against U.S. policy risk, from compensation funds for tariff-hit firms to intra-EU preference mechanisms. Japan and Korea opt for a twin-track approach, stick with the U.S. for security but speed supply corridors through ASEAN and India to avoid being crushed between U.S. tariffs and China's licenses. India sees market gaps and enters via pragmatic pacts, choosing development, not sides. A multi-center order is forming, with the U.S. no longer the hub but one node in the mesh. More worrying, the WTO, the referee of trade rules, has been neutered. As powers erect barriers and cite national security for everything, no one trusts the common umpire. The game shifts to a new level, setting tech standards. Set the standard, hold the future profit pool. But America is weakening its own hand as allies begin drafting standards without waiting for Washington. 3 layers of impact are already clear. Short-term, firms worldwide build inventories, delay investment, and push up capital costs as logistics run in circles. Medium-term, regional industrial corridors sprout. Europe with ASEAN, Japan with India, to cut risk and preserve autonomy. Long-term, technical standards fragment batteries, chips, energy, materials, industrial data, each speak their own language, lowering global productivity and raising trade costs. The U.S. slowly loses its central seat in the production network it once designed. The essence is simple. Countries aren't anti-America. They're anti-American risk. When they see Washington's policy can flip on a tweet or a campaign rally, they choose the safe path, diversification. That is the first sign of a great power in decline, when allies draft Plan B without asking the old leader. If the U.S. wants to reverse course, it must return to the art of precision. Trade's sledgehammer must become a scalpel, target genuine distortions, industrial subsidies, forced tech transfer, IP violations, rather than blanket tariffs. Dependent sectors like rare earths, semiconductor software, and EDA need time-bound targeted exemptions paired with multi-year localization roadmaps. Revive the Strategic Minerals Alliance with Japan, Korea, Australia, and the EU, shared stockpiles, tax credits, and supply-demand data rather than go it alone. Above all, pledge a minimum 5-year stability pact. No surprise tariff or export control changes outside an announced path. Only when markets feel stability will risk premia fall, investment return, and confidence revive. Investors see it clearly. They don't need the highest returns. They need the lowest, most predictable risk. A giant like America cannot attract global capital if it is the source of uncertainty. Thus, Brussels, Tokyo, and New Delhi seeking their own routes is not betrayal, but the natural act of partners who once trusted the U.S. but can no longer count on consistency. The scaffolding of the old order hasn't collapsed, but the bolts are loose. If Washington keeps using tariffs as a microphone for slogans, and Beijing uses rare earths as a pressure valve, the world's trade map will keep redrawing, no longer U.S.-centric. And then the promise the market will thank us in a few months will echo only as the last reverberation of a confidence fallen from the shelf. Back in America, policy waves touch daily life. Small businesses, the backbone of jobs, have no exemption teams, no bargaining power, no cash to stock up. They raise prices, cut hours, lay off staff. From the farm equipment repair shop in Iowa to the metal fab in Ohio, tariffs on Chinese goods turn fast into attacks on American payrolls. Wall Street might stage technical rebounds, but policy risk doesn't dissipate overnight. Risk premia climb, borrowing costs rise, and with public debt above $36 trillion, a mere plus 1% in rates is approximately $300 billion in annual interest paid by American taxpayers, not China's money. What if Beijing tightens rare earths? What do we do? A fair question, but the answer isn't a 100% hammer. It's a long toolbox. Diversify refining, Australia, Southeast Asia, North America, with years of investment. Condition investment incentives on a realistic stair-step localization ratio. Work standard-based with allies to avoid shooting your own R and D network, and grant targeted, time-limited tariff exemptions for irreplaceable components to avoid price shocks. In short, blueprints, not banners. Yet this morning, we got banners. Result? Retail sales minus 2.3% in September, industrial production minus 1.1%, CPI up 3 straight months. The Fed is trapped. Hike and you choke demand toward recession. Hold and inflation rekindles. The key locking both doors is the 100% tariff. In the cabinet, voices once praising muscular trade grow quiet. Commerce and Treasury shift to firefighting. Anyone who understands markets hears the hammer tapping out a rhythm on the coffin lid of confidence. Bitterly, every market plunge gets blamed on Wall Street controlled by China. But the 401ks of millions of Americans don't sit in Beijing. They sit in their own homes. From Pennsylvania's steel to California's offices, people grasp a simple truth. Protecting America cannot mean impoverishing Americans. The problem here is no longer a macroeconomic equation. It's the swapping of reality between politics and life. When every market drop is pinned on China, complex truths get flattened into emotional narratives. It's the easiest way to avoid facing the fact that these losses are endogenous, products of decisions signed in the White House, not an invisible hand from Beijing. When people's pain becomes propaganda, when the grocery bill is framed as proof of patriotism, politics has strayed too far from economics. In recent years, Americans have grown used to finding an other to blame: China, immigrants, unions, even the Fed. But there's one culprit they rarely name: their own political system, increasingly reactive over strategic, symbolic over substantive. The 100% tariff is textbook symbolic politics. It doesn't fix production, it fixes optics. It doesn't make America richer, it gives anger a home. The tragedy is that this anger is wrapped in national pride, but that pride doesn't repay student loans, patch pension holes, or make the dollar stronger in people's pockets. In Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, once the beating heart of U.S. industry, people see factories draped in flags, but inside are automated lines with half the workers of old. Jobs coming back is a pleasant phrase that omits the jobs coming back don't need people, they need machines. Meanwhile, the prices of everything from meat and gas to medicine keep rising. People are paying for a return they never get to enjoy. On Wall Street, the paradox is they aren't controlled by China. They're controlled by America's political mood. When a White House soundbite can vaporize hundreds of billions in hours, that's not the enemy's power. It's our own fragility. Foreign investors see it perfectly. When they start trimming treasuries, it isn't fear of Beijing, it's fear of Washington, of instability, caprice, and politicized economics. Markets, though fond of risk, fear madness. If protecting America becomes a talisman for every mistake, then which America is being protected? From whom? Not from China, but from itself. Every outward blame is a missed inward look at stagnating productivity, outdated industrial structure, an education system unprepared for a 21st century workforce. That is the enemy within no slogan can defeat. The most painful chapter: those who most cheer America first are hit first. As prices climb, tariffs spread, and jobs shrink, they bear it all. They aren't at the planning table, they're watching the script on TV. They think they're winners in a trade war. In truth, they're paying the fees. A war where soldiers wield wallets, not rifles. A war where victory is an illusion. Meanwhile, large corporations with flexible supply chains and international legal finance arms will find ways around. They'll shift plants to Mexico, India, Vietnam, or simply raise prices. The only one with no workaround is the American consumer. That is the tragedy of protectionism. It starts by protecting workers and ends by punishing them. So when we hear the market will thank us in a few months, or we're doing what's necessary to protect America, remember, economic history offers no case where a nation punished the world without injuring itself. America won the Cold War with science, creativity, and trust, not tariffs. If it wants to keep that position, it must relearn the lesson it once taught the world. Real strength comes from openness, not walls. Policy ripples keep spreading through geopolitics. Beijing chooses silent but deep. Slow rare earth licenses force U.S. firms to source in Australia, Vietnam, Africa, multi-year journeys costing hundreds of billions. In the transition, short-term advantages in batteries, chips, and defense erode. Learn to produce without rare earths sounds mild but plucks a raw nerve. Everyone knows the U.S. can't do it yet. Allies? This time they're acting, not just talking. The EU convenes its trade council, triggers reviews for temporary counter tariffs, fast tracks Asia deals. A week later, it signs an ASEAN memorandum, opens incentives for Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand. Clear message: Europe is seeking substitutes. In Berlin, Volkswagen, Siemens, Bosch, BASF meet urgently, roll out supply chain self-defense, shift stages to Eastern Europe and India, reduce reliance on both the U.S. and China. The Economics Ministry pauses U.S. expansion plans as input costs spike. Paris calls EU finance ministers, drafts support funds. Bruno Le Maire prioritizes trade with India and Brazil and re-engages some energy exchange with China, unseen since 2019. Tokyo boosts independent R&D budgets by $20 billion, invites Korea and Taiwan to build a regional tech-sharing firewall that reduces reliance on U.S. rhythms. Seoul pauses 2 U.S. chip purchases, pivots to China and Singapore. Its trade ministry bluntly: we support free trade, but we can't let politics paralyze semiconductors. New Delhi signs a bilateral with the EU and rebuffs Washington's ask to curb component exports to China. PM Modi: India doesn't pick sides, we pick development. ASEAN, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia launch intra-bloc stimulus, accelerate integration to offset softer U.S. demand. Jakarta declares, we can't live in a system where each decision in Washington whips prices overnight. Zoom out. So-called protection is building a wall of isolation. America, once a lighthouse of stability, now flickers like a lamp in political gusts. The paradox of self-reliance. The more you cut ties, the more fragile you become. In the age of globalization, strength comes from connection, not severance. Strategic rivals exploit the opening. China expands CNY settlements in BRICS+. Russia and Saudi Arabia tighten energy links. Brazil and India lay new tech bridges. Common denominator: bypass the USD. That is Washington's strategic nightmare. As trade drifts from the dollar, America's politico-financial leverage weakens. Ironically, the 100% tariff, meant to deter China, speeds de-Americanization. Inside the U.S., the fiscal math is perverse. 2025 import tariffs are projected to raise plus $88 billion, but support, transfers, and relief for price spikes top $110 billion, one in, one and a half out, a negative $22 billion hole in the first quarter alone. Foreign investors trim treasuries, borrowing costs rise, with debt $36 trillion, plus 1% rates approximately, plus $300 billion interest per year. That's taxpayer money, not a fine on China. A 100% tariff doesn't punish Beijing, it punishes Washington. The U.S. still imports, just at higher prices. A nation can print more dollars, but it cannot reprint trust. Look again at Make America Great Again. What we see now is costlier, shakier, lonelier. Europe readies for a world without America, more African investment, broader BRICS plus channels, standalone ASEAN deals. A German diplomat is blunt. America is no longer a pillar of stability. They act like a family business where the owner's mood decides everything. A bitter summary of the 100% tariff era. At home, polarization splits perception. One side hails a hero, the other sees a wrecking ball. In between, the silent majority sees only rising prices, falling jobs, and sinking confidence. Small businesses, no leverage, no cushion, take the hit directly. As costs climb, they curl up, trim margins, shutter block by block. Manufacturing jobs returning turns paradoxical. New jobs don't arrive. Old ones disappear. U.S. manufacturing revives through automation, not tariffs. When inputs get pricier, even automated lines don't pay. New investment halts, technology slows, the pulse of American innovation skips. More irony. To protect U.S. tech from China, the White House tightens sensitive software exports to a fog of rules. Result, AI, semiconductors, and EDA get trapped in licensing mazes. Collaborations with Asian partners are canceled, customers lost, test data lost, advantage lost. In an AI age, shutting doors on scientific cooperation is the swiftest way to shut progress itself. And so, the big picture, an America retreating behind tariff walls, clutching a promise of independence without the supply chain to make it real. Steel, batteries, rare earths still imported. The microphones praising no need for China still carry Chinese parts. That irony is worth more than any commentary. From here, economics is politicized past control. Each tariff is a campaign message. Each price swing a trophy. When stability, predictability, and cooperation are replaced by emotion, fear, and division, a strong economy weakens, not for lack of money, but for lack of reason. The world looks at America and asks, why is the nation that led globalization dismantling it by hand? The answer, sadly, lies in the fear of a challenged status. As power wobbles, the White House builds walls instead of bridges. Retreat looks strong, but makes America small, small in vision, small in influence, small in its allies' trust. In Davos and Brussels, people are starting to plan the world after America. Not anti-American, just non-dependent. This is the silent collapse of power. No war, no coup. Just a series of tariff missteps signed under camera flashes and applause, shifting the global order. In that chain, the most frightening thing isn't inflation or recession, but the loss of trust. In the USD, in U.S. markets, in Washington's word. And today, with a 100% tariff, we're trading trust for slogans. When the tide recedes from the beach of equities, when NASDAQ's red candles leave the front page, what remains is the naked truth. America weakens not because of an enemy, but because of its own choices. The 100% tariff is not an industrial strategy. It's a symbol of an era where emotion smothers reason, retaliation replaces leadership. And when someone says protecting American workers, look squarely. Prices up, jobs down, debt swelling, allies distant, investors wary. That's not protection. It's sacrificing America to the illusion of strength. Ladies and gentlemen, let's zoom the microscope onto the fatal joint. From 70 to 104% tariffs in 2024 to the 100% add-on in 2025, a policy tool has been pushed into a national self-sanctioning mechanism. Brussels is candid. The era of trade built on Washington is over. Tokyo is cold steel. Prepare for an age of U.S. unpredictability. Beijing calls it a heaven-sent gift to BRICS plus, and Gulf states begin testing when in oil trades, market policy, geopolitics, pivoting in sync. A 100% tariff doesn't break China's leg. It makes the Western system wobble. Allies loosen their seatbelts. The market compass spins to Washington's irregular beat. Economics is simple. Every barrier has a price. For America, it's macro imbalance, stubborn inflation, melting confidence, and deepest of all, fractured credibility. Money can be printed, debt can be borrowed, credibility cannot be reissued. Allies puzzle, investors reprice risk, grocery-paying citizens ask, who are we defeating? The direct answer, no one. Only U.S. taxpayers footing a war they never chose. Rarely has the U.S. run so hard against its three pillars: free trade, international cooperation, policy transparency, turning the slogan "Take Back Control" into the loss of control over trust, markets, and leadership. The transmission mechanism of the 100% shock is clinical. Supply chains and corporate finance absorb higher costs, so SMEs face only bad options. Raise prices, cut pay hours, shelve investment. Risk premia and borrowing costs creep up with public debt $36 trillion. A plus 1% rate means approximately $300 billion interest a year. The fiscal ledger turns negative out of the gate. Tariff plus $88 billion versus relief, transfer $110 billion. Silent inflation bleeds consumption while confidence sags. Geopolitics drifts off U.S. orbit as Brussels, Tokyo, Seoul, New Delhi take detours, build supply chain firewalls, expand non-USD settlement, and erect regional R&D webs, not anti-America, but anti-American risk. Hence, the political accountability is direct. Mr. Trump confuses commercial negotiation with political performance, trades long-term advantages, credibility, norms, alliances for short-term crowd effects, and impoverishes resilience by skipping the real self-strengthening path. Rare earth refining, talent, R&D, targeted exemptions, localization roadmaps, shock-absorbing alliances to swing the tariff hammer that burns down the house to catch one mouse. At the G7, it was said bluntly, and the room fell silent. America is turning the system it built into a burden for the world. Canada widens talks with the EU and India. At the UN, economic resolutions no longer wait on U.S. lead. Reverse globalization is no longer a conference cliche, but a lived trajectory as the world fears Washington's caprice more than its rivals. At home, polarization slides to extremes. Idolization on one side, fury on the other, exhaustion in the middle. As economics becomes a campaign weapon, voters hostages, businesses props, and a single signature in the White House shakes the American dream more than any distant crisis. Bottom line, a 100% tariff cannot subdue China. It is subduing America to its own price tag, alienating allies and skewing the world's compass away from Washington. And if we still ask, who are we beating? The answer remains, no one. And this is not a campaign speech. This is commentary, and we must speak in facts. There is no tariff wall thick enough to hide an economy injuring itself. There is no slogan big enough to cover a national bill swelling by the day. If the goal is resilience, invest and design. If the goal is negotiation, be precise and targeted. If the goal is just applause, remember, slogans don't pay bills. And this morning, America is relearning that the most expensive way possible, If you believe today's broadcast exposes a truth the mainstream shies from, smash like, share this video, and subscribe right now. Every click is a voice ensuring truth isn't drowned out by noisy slogans. Don't let this story pass like any other news item, because as history shows, empires don't fall from an enemy outside, but from blindness within. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we lift the veil on the U.S. political economic storm shaking the world.